Good morning. How impressive could somebody be if she couldn't figure out how to turn her microphone on? Okay. I am so proud to be here this morning and looking at a group of women, some men, that have passion and that have an idea about how they want to change the world. And yesterday, I had the privilege of spending time with two startup companies here in Helsinki and the women that are involved in them. And had an opportunity to meet the women from DLD, Stephanie Searcy. And she made a comment that I think is just really one of the most important things that we can remember. And she said, let's stop talking about what's not working. And let's just start talking to each other and spending time with each other. And so thank you for inviting me here today to spend the time with you. And so let's talk a little bit about women in technology and what it means for the world going forward. Thank you for the great introduction. Since you know who I am, I'm just going to skip through and talk about what really is my interest and my passion. And that is how the world is going to change. And we've come out of a really interesting period of time in the globe. And so this isn't a U.S. or an Asian or European phenomenon. We have all experienced an evolution, or you can even call it in some circumstances a revolution, in terms of how we look at trust, how we define economics and what our economic health is. We've got an emerging generation. This is the first tribe of fully digital natives called the Millennials. And by 2030, they will control 75% of the workforce. And they have a very different perspective. You're all sitting in the room. The ones of you that are millennials are going like this. You're shaking your heads. You're going, yes, we are going to change the world. And you will, because you have a point of view that is much more about the health of your community and the health of your businesses and the health of your society versus just the accumulation of wealth. And that shows very clearly in almost every study that we see about millennials. You are different. You're not only digitally wired, but because you have had the opportunity to grow up with extraordinary interconnectedness from peer platforms, you can get information, you can give information, you can take the power of one and turn it into the power of many just by utilizing what you grew up with. And you have changed the world so far. And I think you will be the ones that will continue to move the progress of women in technology. And I think it's important to understand that you're coming into a workforce that's going to be multi-generational. You're going to have older women like me. You're going to have Gen Y people. And you're going to be coming into that workforce and you're going to be understanding that it's very different. The way you think, the way we think is very different. And I'm counting on you to be the ones that move technology forward. And so we know that this is a global phenomenon. All of the things I talked about, the change in trust, the millennial generation coming into power, pervasive peer platforms for computing, and the economic meltdown. We know that that's global. And we've listened to some global voices talking about how it's changed their perspective. And there was a study that was done by John Gerzema and Michael D'Antonio for some research they were doing on a book called The Athena Doctrine. And it said basically the following: 76% of the global population does not think that their country cares for its citizens as much as it did in the past. 86% feel that governments and organizations have too much power over the individual. 51% feel that their children's lives will not be as good as theirs. And 66% have said that if only men thought more like women, the world would be a better place. And I'm going to get back to that in a little bit because I think that's important. Or as a colleague of mine once said, we have to see that they will really, really screw things up before they'll ask us for help. Okay? So I think right now we're really, really screwed up and they're asking us for help. So this is our opportunity. And so what I want to do is take 3 areas and look at them that have to do with the ability of women to become leaders in technology. And I'm sorry that this is, somewhat of an eye chart here, but what I want you to look at is the red line. This is an indication of the enrollment for women in computer science curriculum at university. And what you'll see is if you compare it to medical school or law school or any of the other physical sciences, the computer science enrollment for women peaked in 1985, and versus the other sciences or professions that I mentioned, it continued not up but down. And so today we are looking at less than 20% of new enrollment in university for women is in computer science. And I'm going to give you some information on a university out in California called Harvey Mudd. And I think you'll find that this is not an indication that this is the way it's going to be, but this is what we are going to be recovering from. And so I think when we talk about, for example, the company that we met yesterday, said, I need 10 coders right away. And that's something I hear all the time when I go see startup companies. We need coders right away. So, by the way, for the company that we saw yesterday, stand up here. The CEO of that company, stand up. Where are you? I saw you. I know you were here. Don't be shy. Come on, stand up. Where'd you go? Where is she? She's hiding. This was your opportunity. That was going to be a free advertisement for recruiting. You were going to get to see people there she is, right there. She just stood up. Okay, there she is, right there. She needs 10 coders right away. So everybody that's looking for or has people that are looking for coders, there you go, right there. I think this is why we are finding, not just in the Nordic and Scandinavian countries, but all over the globe, there are a shortage of women that can come into not only entry-level positions in tech, but then can move from there into senior levels. And university curriculum and university registration is one of the ways of tracking the kind of progress that we need to make. We can also look at what happens post-graduation, because that's an indication of how effective the education system is. And one of the things we do still see, and this is very unfortunate, but that post-university, women still are dealing with the compensation gap. And in the last 4 years, there has been a slight improvement in this, but the statistics are very tricky because you don't know if it's actually women that are making progress or the fact that men are making different decisions, and you see the trend of men going into service positions because the manufacturing jobs are going away. Plus, many men are also electing to be home and have the experience of raising their families. So you don't really know whether or not these statistics are indicating progress. But we do see some change in that gap. However, you are not going to find a woman engineer and a man engineer in the same position. 95% of the time, the woman engineer is making at least 30% less. Okay? So when thinking about this, I wanted to know, how do other people view this? And so I found a clip of some interviews that were being done at Harvard Business School on women in technology and gender bias.
I think it's kind of interesting as a millennial generation who's grown up with really no difference in men and women, and I've had the same opportunities my whole life, and so in a lot of ways entering, you kind of ask the question like, are those things necessary at this point?
You can't be too strong-armed with this stuff, right?
Is there already a backlash?
There is. What's been helpful is that there's been a lot more data that has come out to talk about, for example, females are, their studies have shown that they're better investors than males. Or when you have a board of directors that has a female on it, they tend to actually outperform those that have no females. When you get data out there, I think that goes against a lot of the backlash. And so people I know who originally were part of that backlash have actually been turned by the data. And so I think this is a very analytical place. Data is always going to help you get over things like that.
So I found it really interesting that when they interviewed the man, he immediately went to his analytics. Oh, yes, the data shows things are changing. But when they asked the woman, she said, oh, well, we're millennials, and candidly, we don't think about that at all. So very interestingly, there was an intuitive thinking, feeling response from the young woman, and then there was the data analytics response from the man. Well, the data is going to show me this. One of the reasons I picked that clip was because I wanted you to see that perception is what drives action. Facts don't necessarily change what's going to happen in the world. It's perception that gets people moving. And so when I leave here today, I will feel very excited if I've inspired one or two of you to think about the facts, but to take what's inside you. What is that passion? What is that you want to do? What is that feeling? Go out and take that feeling and change the world. Because data analytics is only going to get you so far. You need to go out and inspire people to change. And the quote, be the change you want to see, that's it. So education is one area. The other area is innovation. Let's talk about women and innovation. These are some very interesting numbers on the impact that women are having in the entrepreneurial world. Globally, there are $224 million worth of revenue being generated by women who own their own businesses. They take that revenue and they invest 90 cents of every dollar back into their business in some form of human development. Better benefits, increased training, opportunities for women to go into internships, that kind of thing. Now that's versus 35 cents on average that male owners reinvest in human activities in their business. Fascinating to me. In the next 6 years, they will create 72 million new jobs because those companies that have 5 or more people today plan on hiring within the next 5 years, bringing that total workforce up to 72 million. And in total, global enterprises, 37% of those enterprises are run by women. So this is a huge opportunity. 37% isn't a lot. It's progress, but it goes to show you that we have a great deal more progress to make, not when it just comes to getting women into technology, but women into technology running their own businesses. And this is from the Kauffman Foundation GEMS study, which is one of the best resources to use to educate yourself. Now let's talk about venture. Another area. We've talked about education, innovation opportunity. Now in the venture world, there's a very sad fact. And that is, if you're going to go into venturing, either as an entrepreneur or as a venture capitalist, you probably want to be a good-looking man. I see a few of those in the room, but I see an awful lot more of good-looking women here. Okay? And actually, I see a good-looking man from my past. There's Mr. Ansi Vanyoki sitting down there, okay? Harvard did a study in 2014 that was published in March in the National Academy of Science Proceedings. And what they did is they did a series of 3 experiments. And they controlled every variable in the experiment that had entrepreneurs pitching to venture capitalists to get investment in their startup companies. They controlled every variable. The pitch script was the same. The business was the same. All the facts and data that they gave the investors were the same. Nothing different except for two things: gender and attractiveness. Now, it's going to be no surprise to the people in this room that there's a significant correlation between an entrepreneur's gender and whether or not they successfully were able to receive investment money. The most successful in those 3 experiments were attractive men. Non-attractive men came next. So for those of you with little brothers that you think are the most unruly, ugly things in the world, they will get investment money before you will. Okay? And next came attractive women. So all of you were in really good shape there. And then the women that would never get any money because they don't fit the Athena view of the world. So if we're saying that we know, we think that this happens, we don't just think that it happens, we know that it happens. And we know that because if you look at PitchBook statistics, in 2013, only 13% of investment dollars from venture capitalists went to women. And of that 13%, let me give you a few pieces of information that are really fascinating. Women never ask for as much money as they really need. They ask for less. Men ask for almost 3 times more than what they need. Okay? Fascinating to me. The other thing is that the women that do receive funding, with the funding that they receive, they generate 40% more revenue in the first 5 years of their business than men. So we ask for less, we don't get it as often, and when we do, fascinating, we do much better with it. So the facts go to show that we can do it. And this is one of my favorite things. Just to let you know that this isn't just about gender bias. This is about people not being embarrassed to say they're biased. At Harvard, they had one of the co-founders of Highland Capital, William Boyce, and he was a keynote speaker. And he opened it up for questions, and he asked people, ask me anything you'd like. So, very courageous young woman gets up and she said, I want to go into venture capital. What would be your advice to me? And Mr. Boyce, in his wisdom, turned around and said, don't. He said, as a matter of fact, not just don't, but consider this a favor that I've told you that we don't really want you there. Now, I'm sure that when Mr. Boyce was able to get out of the room, crawling rather than walking, he probably regretted that comment. Mr. Boyce is no longer at Highland Partners, even though he was the co-founder. But I think it will give you an idea of how brazen this actual bias is, that a well-respected venture capitalist stood up in front of a room of Harvard women MBAs and said, don't go into venture capital, we don't want you. Well, I can tell you, I'm an angel investor, and I work with angel companies, and I want you. So come in. There's angel investment opportunities for women. You can be shown how to do it and do it successfully. And the information I got yesterday was there's actually an angel investment group of women in Helsinki that's about 500 strong. So keep it going. And then there's the world of the enterprise. And we're going to use here Alphabet, or what was previously known as Google. Okay? Google has 57,000 employees globally. 30% of those are women. 18% of those are in technical positions. And 22% are in leadership positions. Now, consider that Google ranks below eBay and Hewlett-Packard and Intel in their diversity statistics. The Big Valley Titans are very bad in diversity. Now, they're working on it, and Google is probably one of the better ones. And actually, the women that you see here, these are real women executives that have either been in Google and have left or have come into Google. And so Google is considered to be one of the premier training grounds for women in tech leadership positions. And we're going to play a game, and I'll give you the answers at the end. Take a look at these women. I'm sure they're names that you know. They were all featured in the September issue of Fortune magazine as the top 150 most powerful women in the world. These were all women that are either at Google now, have just come to Google, or in fact have left Google and gone on to other companies. And so what we're going to do at the end is you're going to look at these companies, and I want to see if you can match up who the women are and where they went. And this is just an example of how one company that makes a small commitment, even though they're not perfect, they can do something in their enterprise that will bring women to the forefront of leadership. And then those women will go out and they will change other companies. So it's just starting, and these are the women that are going to do it. And why? The quote I mentioned earlier, 66% of the population thought that the world would be a better place if women thought like men. Men thought like women. Let's talk about the feminine and masculine attributes generally. Masculine, they're aggressive, they're independent, they're decisive, they're analytical, they're proud, they're resilient. All of those things that one loves to see in a male leader. With the exception of, that doesn't seem to have put the world in a place where too many people want to be today. Now, let's talk about the new world. A world in which those feminine attributes of collaboration, empathy, future planning, sensitivity, selflessness, passionate, intuitive women will become the leaders of the world. They are the leaders of the world because this is a much more complex world. There's not linear thinking as the only mode of thinking to make sense in the world. Women who communicate, who are intuitive, who collaborate, who listen, who are patient, who are willing to be selfless and work as a team, they are the ones that will propel organizations, countries, and entrepreneurship forward. Because those are the traits in a complex world that are the traits of success. And this goes back to the study I mentioned earlier about John and Michael D'Antonio. They were trying to decide and to understand in the future, how do leaders need to behave differently? Well, leaders with feminine attributes will be the leaders that will take their organizations to the next level. So these attributes that previously people always said to you, oh, that's a soft attribute. When you write a resume and you're putting down what your skills and capabilities are, tell me how much revenue you've raised. That's really important. But if you can also show that you've taken a team of diverse people, multi-generational workforce, different backgrounds, different cultures, that you have taken those people and you have actually built a company and put them together, and you've done that as the center of a team, that's equally as important. And that's based on your female human attributes that generally center around compassion, listening, and patience. So how is the world changing with all this? I talked to you before about the university registration, enrollment. A very dear colleague of mine, I encourage you to look her up. Her name is Dr. Maria Cloway, is the chancellor of Harvey Mudd University, which is part of the Mills College system in the United States. In May, their first graduating class that was the highest percentage of female students. 56% of their graduating class were female in computer engineering, and 44% were male. Maria Klawe came to that university 5 years ago. Their graduation rate was over 80% men. And in 5 years, with her team of very extraordinary women, she changed the curriculum, she changed the culture and environment, she changed the incentive programs, and she made a difference with her team. This is a tangible difference. This percentage, 56% of women that graduated out of Harvey Mudd University, which is considered in the United States now to be one of the best computer engineering schools, that 56% of the women are going to come out, and they're going to be the ones that are going to work with you to make that change. And you can see the ecosystem is expanding in every area. You've got, for capital, you've got accelerators that are all run by women. You've got non-equity crowdfunding, which is mostly around provision of intellectual capital. You've got equity crowdfunding. So proud because this company called Portfolio, which was founded by a woman colleague of mine, Trish Costello. It is a crowdfunding platform for women to invest in women, and that has led to another fund being launched called the Rising Tide Fund. They launched it in Europe, in London, last month. The Rising Tide Fund will be global within 3 years. The idea is that in each area, 10 accredited women angel investors will put up $100,000 each to build an investment fund. That fund will be used to do initial investment in women-led startup companies. And with that, those women commit, each of those 10 will bring in 99 more women. Train them, mentor them, sponsor them, and get them involved in angel investing. Now, that's, as Jim Collins would say, that's a big, hairy-ass goal. But it's what will change the world. If you figure 99 women times, 30 countries, that's a lot of women doing investing and leading people in the right direction. And that's more expansion of this ecosystem. So what's really happening in the ecosystem? I want you to know that women-led startup ventures, they have at least 5 women in the company. They are 61% more successful. They fail less than 39% of the time. This is also from the Kaufman-Gem study. So that says once we get the money and we build our teams, we outperform. And you see that, as I said, in a lot of the activities. There's the Rising Tide funds, there's Portfolio, and there's something published that you ought to take a look at, especially if you're entrepreneurs looking to raise capital. It's called Feminomics. 150 of the top angel investors in the world that are women. Contact information, what they invest in, what the size of their investments are and stage, etc. And so we've talked a lot. As Stephanie said, let's talk. I've talked, you've listened. But this is the match for where the executives are. Susan Wojciechowski, which was the 16th employee of Google, she runs YouTube. Marissa Mayer, you all know her. She came from Google and went to Yahoo. Megan Smith left Google and became the first U.S. Technology Department head. Angela Ahrendts came from Burberry. She's running retail for Apple. Ruth Porat just left Morgan Stanley. She's come into Google. And Claire Hughes Johnson left Google, and she is now the CEO of Stripe, startup company. So you see, it's happening. Things are changing. Women are leaving and making a difference. So where to go now? What you could be interested in? What might you want to do? Given the thinking styles and feminine attributes we just talked about, there are some excellent opportunity areas, both for employment, as somebody here told me, working for a paycheck, or venturing entrepreneurship. Cybersecurity. The thinking attributes and problem-solving skills of women, phenomenal. Our ability to collaborate, to look at problems differently, to get groups of people to help us. That's what cybersecurity needs. I mean, all of you open the paper every morning and you see another company that's been hacked. All right? T-Mobile got hacked through Experian. All right? Morgan Stanley was hacked. This morning another one came out, 5 retail companies, all using the same provider, were hacked. Cybersecurity is where the kind of thinking we do is needed. Technology forensics. It's kind of the CSI of cybersecurity. You know, do you want to go in there and be able to tell what happened? Once again, our attributes lend themselves well to that kind of work. If you're interested in venturing, you want to either become an investor or you want to become an entrepreneur. Don't overlook corporate venturing organizations. Corporate venturing organizations have the money, the resourcing, and the training programs to teach you and bring you in, and you can do it under the umbrella of a large company. Nokia had them, Intel has them, HP has them, Google has them. But it's one way of getting yourself in there and being able to get trained so you eventually can go out on your own. Take client proximate positions. Put yourself as close to your clients as possible, because that is going to give you an advantage. The fact that you can listen better and the fact that you can intuit. When you're close to the clients, you can create a lot more value. Take those positions even though they might be a little bit scary, because we don't network the same way that men do. We network to build relationships and to have meaning. Men network to make money. It's different, okay? But don't be embarrassed to network to make money, to make influence. Don't be embarrassed to do that. Be aware of second-generation gender bias. It's not going to all be as awful as William Boyce standing in front of the room and telling them they don't want you. You're going to come up to second-generation bias, and sometimes you're not going to know it till it's, in fact, it impacted you and you've left the room. Don't be embarrassed to sit down and think about that and go, I didn't like the way that went. And candidly, if you're courageous enough and brave enough, go back and try to talk to the person that happened with. Communicate. Put your needs and your wants out there. Tell people how you want to be treated, and then behave in a manner that allows you to be treated like that. And then leadership purpose. Don't take a leadership training position so you can do leadership training. Look at leadership roles that allow you to take action. There needs to be a strategic and a tactical element to leadership that you have to experience. It can't just be conceptual. Get on a project where you're a leader. Make sure that you're accountable for results, because that's what leaders do. And I'll close with something that I want to be inspirational. It's by Timothy Leary, and he said, "Women who seek to be equal to men lack ambition." Think about that. We don't want to just be equal to men. We want to do better than what men have done so far. We want to contribute more. We want to solve the intractable problems of the world. So be bold. Be courageous. Be a sponsor, not just a mentor. Get out there and advocate for people. And be accepting, because things won't change as fast as we want them to. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Would you have time for a question or two?
Sure.
You've been tweeted and retweeted all over the place with all of that great data, all of that great inspiration. Thank you for that. We have some Finnish innovation right here. It's called the Catchbox. It's right here. Developed in Finland, a wonderful startup company. And we have one at the back as well, because I can't really throw all the way at the other end of the hall with great precision. But you'd be willing to take a question from colleagues. We have one back there. Can you tell us who you are and your question, please? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Xenia, and we have met yesterday with Stephanie. I didn't have a chance to talk then, but actually I have a question related to your talk. So you were mentioning those ex-colleagues of yours who are establishing the funds for women to invest in women startups.
Yes.
So these are some kind of more or less exclusive clubs based on gender and supporting women. So what would happen in the world if actually men decide to establish their own clubs and only invest in men deliberately, not by chance, but you were explaining that some percentage? What kind of future are we looking at then?
Well, it's the future that you have now. Because that's what men do. Venture capital is an exclusive men's club. So if the future is to be different, we need to make it different. And so we had a very interesting discussion yesterday, Pia, Stephanie, Alexandra, and myself. Men do need to be part of the solution, Xenia. They do. They need to be part of the solution. And open arms welcome them to help fix the problems, but don't rely on them to do that.
Thank you. That's a great approach.
And that would probably be, thank you, a great stepping stone, I think, to inject these kind of values into leadership, into investment for the future. We have some gifts for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have gifts for all of our speakers today, and well, I have to say it's a gift for me. I know you're a great fan of Finland, so this is the Finnish Miracle for you.
Yes, thank you.
And this is a book that I'm launching tomorrow in Finland. It's about teaching entrepreneurship to children and families.
Excellent.
And through the story of the greatest entrepreneur in the world, who is a Finnish person. His name is Santa Claus. Here you go.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.